There we go. Okay. Hi, everybody. It's a couple minutes here after 10. Thank you for your continued interest in our writing workshop series. This is session 2. As per my email, if you missed session 1, it's up on rothrocksaf.org if you want to go check that out. I found it enormously useful. Got a lot of tips from Van and Claire, and it actually made me really excited to do some writing. And maybe some creative writing, which I haven't yet embarked on, but I think that was really sort of a compelling way to start this series, because almost all my writing is based for work. It's professional type of stuff, and never really take it into that creative type of realm. So today we've got Dominic Swintowski and Annie Sochi. Did I pronounce that right, Annie?
Maloney too.
Maloney.
Yeah, actually, I recently changed my name to Maloney, but I missed my old name, so Sochi is fine.
Okay, all right, cool. Yeah, so I switched between Fitzsimmons and Lingenfelter, and I always joke that we should have hyphenated just to make it super complicated. Anyway, so thank you guys for showing up. I want to kind of briefly go over the ultimate goal of this series. So yes, we want to push information out to you and have a Q&A afterwards from all of our panelists. Again, we've got these 4 different series, or 4 different workshops in our series. But after that, we don't want that to stop. We don't want that to be the end of this group. We hope afterwards that we create some sort of writing group out of the participants that can help support each other in their own writing. And so we haven't quite completely defined what that's going to look like. We were doing a little bit of brainstorming this morning before we started. But ultimately we might end up having a standing monthly get together or workshop. Maybe it's bi-monthly. If you guys end up having any ideas through the set of the series, let us know. I'm not going to talk much about it again this session, but during session 3, at the end of session 3, we'll start to brainstorm a little bit more. And then by the end of session 4, we'll have something a little bit more well characterized about where we want to take this. But ultimately, yes, we hope that all of you will work together with us to create what we're tentatively calling the Rothrock Writers Guild, because we're being hosted by the Rothrock chapter of SAF. And again, create a group of people who are interested in writing and can help support each other in that pursuit. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Sandy, who is going to MC our session again today. And thank you, Dom and Annie, for helping us out today. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Welcome, everyone. A few housekeeping things here, except for Dom and I guess everyone should have their mics off, which I see you do. That's great. We will probably just handle the questions at the end of each writer's presentation today. So we're going to start with Dominic Swintowski, and Dominic goes by Dom with his friends, and I think we're all his friends, so we're going to call him Dom today. Dom is a fascinating kind of writer, at least to me he is, and he is sort of the new day in writing in some respects, because most of his writing is found on a blog called troutbitten.com. Dom is a fly fishing guide for this part of central Pennsylvania, and I think he goes to other parts of the country and even other countries occasionally to do guiding and fly fishing. He's Bellefonte based, and he's a Penn State grad. I found out about him through a family connection, and just found his work very compelling, very interesting to read. And I'm not a fly fisherman, and yet he's brought fly fishing sort of into my sphere of thinking, I guess you might say, and gotten me very interested in it. Not so much to do it, but more to just learn about it and to enjoy the prose that he writes, the nonfiction that he writes about fly fishing. So Dom, with that, I want to start off and just say welcome to you, and say, how did you get started in writing, and what appealed to you most about becoming a writer?
Hey, thanks for having me, and I appreciate the kind words there about the writing. Trout Bitten is where almost all my writing is. There's 600 articles now on Trout Bitten, 600 plus. I always think it's neat when guys like yourself talk about how you're not even a fly fisherman, you're not even an avid trout fisherman, as I understand it, but you like the writing. That's cool. There's a lot of different kinds of pieces on Trout Bitten, so I enjoy writing the stories, what I call kind of the stories side, and then the tactics side. Sometimes I enjoy blending them together. So how I got started writing, I suppose my mom would tell you that, well, she's even given me papers that I wrote, you know, in fifth grade. I'd like to find those again. That'd be neat. I don't know. I've always enjoyed it, you know, back that early. But there's definitely a creative side to me as a musician. Well, I'm still a musician, but I did it as a profession for 16 years. Wrote and recorded a bunch of songs too. I've always enjoyed that creative side. So how I've gotten started, I suppose, is there's a need for me to fulfill that creative drive. And writing became that outlet for me. 2014, when I started trout bitten, with no idea. It was just a fishing blog. I had no plans to make a career out of it. But now the writing is the heart of what I do. It drives, well, that website drives everything else. And even the ad revenue and the affiliate link revenue directly pays me. And then the reason I'm able to book 100 guide trips a year is because the website reaches out and brings people in. Whereas, like, I'd say most of the guides that I know, well, they do a lot of presentations, and I like doing presentations. They'll travel across the country to go reach people. They go to fly fishing trade shows to reach people, and I'm able to just use the website to reach out and bring people in. I graduated with an English degree, I started at Penn State, but I finished at IUP, just to be clear about that one thing. You know, I was an English major, so that's what was interesting to me. That's how I got started. That's what drove me to it, or drew me to it, is that I started to see the doors opening up for me as after 2014. Well, there wasn't a whole lot. It was late 2014 when I got started with the blog, and at that time I would call it a blog. Now it's a website. It's really branched out. 2017 is when I really saw those doors opening up for me. People were getting in touch with me. Fly fishing companies were getting in touch and saying, "Hey, can we run ads?" And I thought, like, oh, okay, you'll give me a couple bucks a month. But I realized that the audience that I was gaining, because there's now 1.5 million views a year to the website. And they're quality views. We're not talking about the bot traffic and stuff like that. So with all that traffic, and it continues to grow, the fly fishing companies are very willing and sometimes anxious, I suppose, to run the ads on the site.
Interesting. Dom, let me clarify a couple things here. So was it nonfiction you were interested in when you chose the English major, or was it all types of literature?
Yeah, definitely all types. I focused on 20th century American lit in college, but I really enjoyed my research writing classes. And I just enjoyed writing the papers. I told you yesterday when we spoke briefly, like, everybody else took exams, right? And we'd be writing 20, 40-page papers for our, instead of taking exams. I just always enjoyed, give me something to write about, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, you've kind of answered my next question, because I wanted to know where you publish your writing. And I just want to point out to people, Dom's site, as he says, has about 600 articles, and they're organized by various topics. And so if you're interested in one topic, like children and the outdoors, or certain fly fishing technique that maybe you've heard about before, you can go there and find a group of articles around each of those. So in effect, it's where you publish, and it's like several books that you've put up online worth of material for free. Yeah.
It is. It would be a very tall stack of books. Yeah. There's a lot there. That's really become one of the challenges is, I don't know, most blogs don't have that much material. Most blogs too don't have as many. I've started to call them series, like a dry dropper series, tight line nymphing series, like you said, a fishing with kids series. Because I realized right away, oh my, there's a lot to write about. So I stopped trying to jam everything into one article. And I like to write about 1,000 words, 1,200 words. You get up over 1,800 words, and it's getting to be a little much for one sitting. Anyway, people have certain expectations of what a blog is. And
there's not as, if you go to the average fishing blog even, there's just not nearly as much content, and not as much content that dovetails. You know, I wrote an article, a part 1 article is what's published right now up top. Yeah, that one that Sandy's showing you. If you scroll down just a tiny bit there, you'll see the title of that article, Euro nymphing, what you're missing by following FIPS competition rules, part 1. Well, part 2 will be on Monday. And that's my point. There'll probably be a part 3. And so what Sandy's scrolling down to now is Dog Days, which was a story. And that's probably something Sandy enjoyed reading because, I mean, it's not a technical article like the one above it. But anyway, all these series, I even have there's one about my dad and I, there's another story. Anyway, I even have a series of articles about a friend of mine and named Smith. And that's the kind of work that could eventually be put into a compilation. And each of those, let's say 11, 1,200, 1,400 word articles or stories expanded on. And, you know, I have plans to do all that too. Yeah. Thanks
Dom,
for
just because, I'm sorry I did that without your asking. I just jumped to the blog site just to show people, sort of like B-roll in the background while you were talking. So a couple things I want to just ask you quickly, because somebody might be wondering, don't you write about anything else? You know, is it all about trout? Do you ever write for the you know, some association, like an outside history group or a softball league, you know, article or something like that? Do you do any other writing besides that which relates to trout fishing and the outdoors?
That's a fair question. The quick answer is no, not right now. And my buddy Steve has asked me a couple of times, hey, do you ever think you'll run out of material? Or do you ever think you get bored of writing about fishing? And there's so much to write about in terms of fishing. And what I just described is, you know, the stories articles and the tactics articles, there's so much. I can't see myself getting bored of it anytime soon. And I won't run out of material because I get to blend the fiction and the nonfiction, the tactics, and then most of the stories are true. I mean, but I often will take a story that's something that didn't happen perfectly, but I'll make it perfect. You know, there are some stories on trout bitten that I've taken. It's really enjoyable as a writer to take something that happened this day and something that happened a year ago and blend the two together. And I have that artistic license to do that. I've done that with some of the Smith stories. Really, Smith is this character on trout bitten that it started out really as my friend Pat. And I would early, if you go back and read a lot of trout bitten stories, a lot of them were about my buddy Pat Burke. And as trout bitten really started to gain an audience, it made Pat uncomfortable to have his name out there like that. And so I kind of changed Pat's name to Smith. And then I didn't have to have all the stories be, you know, exactly it happened this way and that way. It really freed me up. You know, we did stuff like that in school when I was, you know, an English major. And I don't know, now I've really enjoyed using that artistic license. Anyway, I'm never going to run out of material, but as far as whether I'll write for other, I don't know, organizations and things, I would. And even now I'm getting offers to write for fly fishing company websites. And I've been turning those down really because I don't have time. That's what it really comes down to. I work about 25 or 30 hours a week on the writing and on the website, trout bitten website itself. And then I guide full time and I coach baseball teams and you know, have a family with 2 boys. I really don't have time to write anywhere else right now. And what I'm doing is paying me. So right now I'm not writing for anybody else.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Dom, I'll point out one thing to the audience, and then we'll jump to the next question, is that the photography is beautiful on your site. You work with pros to give you stuff, or semi-pros, aspiring pros. Yeah. And you've also branched into video, haven't you? You started, at least you have the first video up there. And you're right, you wrote the script, obviously, for that. And so there's another venue kind of to show your work.
The videos are coming. My buddy Josh, they're coming, more of them. My buddy Josh Darling has the company Wilds Media, And, you know, he's starting out, well, he's established in some ways, but he's branching out into bigger things. And I'm excited that he's going to be part of it. Yeah, the photography, I appreciate that. That's kind. You know, I do a lot of the, if it's not credited to someone else, then it's my shot. But I think, well, I know that the photographers, there's about 7 of us. They're happy to have a place to display their work. It drives them, it motivates them to take pictures when they're out, when they know that they can come back, drop some, you know, do a little editing, and then drop some files in, or drop some photos in a Google Drive folder, and they know that a lot of people are going to see them, and it's a chance for them to be creative. It's been fun to see also the quality of those photos get better and better. As like my buddy Bill Dell started out, he'll tell you, he's like, man, those early photos, we got to take some of those off. You know, he's gotten a lot better.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I will make a connection for the audience, especially if they weren't here last week, that the first writer that we met here in our series was a musician primarily, and then has started writing quite a bit more. And here is an interesting parallel between you and him. The other thing you mentioned, and I want to put a word to this, is you create composite characters sometimes. So they're kind of made up of the, you know, the elements of 2 different people. Or you have an imaginary friend, like it's Smith.
There you go.
And I've, you know, having the name Smith, I appreciated that. I guess Smith is an everyman kind of guy, and so I enjoy reading about that fella, even though he doesn't exist really, except in parts of different people. So we've got to jump to this next question, because this is an important one for our audience. So, what's your process for writing? And are there particular tools or methods you use?
Yeah, I write 3 times a week. So that's where the process starts. And I hold my feet to the fire on that. As I was saying earlier, I mean, with no publisher or no editor in between me and what goes on the website next, I need to self-motivate. But that started being easy for me in my first year as an English major. I suppose the first semester I went, whew, man, this is a lot of writing. But then when we were forced to write, and I enjoyed it too, that's just carried over. It's never been hard for me to just sit down and write. And that's my writing process, is that it mostly happens in the mornings for me. Yeah, when I'm, all right, so I guide 100 trips a year, but I do them in a spring season and a fall season. And so I do have, like right now, I'm not guiding. I'll start guiding end of September again. So I really enjoy these times when I'm not guiding. It's much easier to write when I'm not guiding full time 5 days a week. But even when I am guiding 5 days a week, I still publish 3 times a week too. So it's just a lot more. My process then is to just sit down and know that I have to write something. And I kind of think it is writing, editing, and then final, you know, putting it on into WordPress and putting it on the site. I would say one of the biggest obstacles, what I hear from people is, you know, it's not uncommon, but, you know, how to get started. And I never really worry about that first sentence, that first paragraph. Whatever ideas I have, I just start writing. Now, a lot of times they do end up as the first paragraph or even the first sentence, but just start writing. If somebody is listening to this, and if you have that problem, like writer's block, whatever you want to call it, you don't know where to start. If that's the problem, doesn't matter. You don't need to write the first thing first. You just write. What's your idea right now? Just write it. Just put it on paper. And then eventually later in the editing process, you'll know where that block of text that you put down ends up. Just so holding my feet to the fire, or staying committed to what my goals were in the first place, which is to be sure I publish 3 times a week. And then to just start. And, I would say that I won't let myself stop. I learned this when I was writing songs. I won't let myself really stop the writing. Again, these are 1,100, 1,200, 1,400 word articles. Let's say 2,000 max. Anyway, I won't let myself stop that writing process until it's done. Doesn't have to be good, but it has to be done. You know, I have a family, so sometimes that's not always doable. But if things go a lot smoother if I just write and write and write until I start to come to some conclusion, or I feel like I have enough text that's probably going to fill up for an article, and then I'll walk away from it. And then I like to stay ahead too. Like the article that's going to publish Monday, I actually wrote yesterday, and now today I'll probably spend a good bit of time editing it. And then Saturday or tomorrow, Sunday, either one, I will start to put it into WordPress. And I'll have to start and finish putting it into WordPress.
Dom, a couple questions just are begging to be asked here. And one is, this sounds like a newspaper man. He's got deadlines, he's got to get it out, and he doesn't have any time for someone to look it over. You know, he can't send it back to the person he interviewed or to someone who's in the story for their feedback, for their suggestions or proofing. Do you, do you get feedback on articles that you write regularly or once in a while? How do you do that?
You mean before I publish them?
Yes.
Yeah, almost always no now at this point. When I wrote about one time a week, once or twice a week back in 2014, 15, and 16, my wife I would often have my wife look at them. We met at IUP as English majors, so she's good at proofreading, and not just proofreading, but editing. Let's call it that, where this should go here and that should go there, and you're too long on this part, or this doesn't make sense. Yeah, I used to, but honestly, after 4 or 5 and now 600 articles, I've gotten better at it, and I like to think I've gotten pretty good at it, and I don't need it anymore, to be honest. Now, what sort of my process or unspoken system that we have, I publish certain days, and my buddy Austin has learned to expect to he's learned to expect when a new article is going to be up. He might even have a notification up from his RSS feed or something, because within a couple hours of when I publish it and actually put it online, Austin will often text me and say, "Oh, hey, period, comma, spelling error, whatever." Something. It's a proofreading thing. So Austin sort of proofreads he does. Austin proofreads my work, but really, it's after the fact. It's after it's published. And now the nice thing about having a website instead of printed work is that I can very easily, even days or of course even years later, just go and change the content and make those corrections. And to be honest too, there are many readers who will get in touch with me a year later from an article they were reading, and they'll say, "Oh, hey, either this link is broken to something that I wrote about, or a spelling error, something." And I always encourage people, because I'm only one guy trying to, do the whole process. I always encourage people, if you find any mistake, let me know. And so there are some close friends and now some guided clients who I don't know, semi-regularly will help me out. Usually it's the way something's displaying, because we didn't even talk about it, but a very large part of my job is the website maintenance and expansion. I really am getting to the point now where I need to hand a lot of that off. Trout Bitten's grown a lot, and I need to hand off some of that work. It's to grow Trout Bitten even more with the other doors that are opening. I need to be able to let go of some of the website work.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point. I know from my own experience too with websites, you need a maintenance person, because you can't keep creating content and doing a great job on the creative side if people are bombarding you with emails saying, change this, look at this, link doesn't work or whatever. It's tough to find the time. Yeah. Let me just ask you a quick.
Yeah, sorry.
Before we jump to the next one, Dom, I just want to make sure we understand this though. So you're saying that you start an article and you hold your feet to the fire and you keep working on it. But don't you ever find yourself with an article you can't finish, and so you put that to the side and you start on another article, and then you may have 2 or 3 that you're juggling, or is it never that way? I just want a clarification on that.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's never that way. In the past, maybe it's happened. If I put something aside, I usually hardly ever finish it. What I will do sometimes is I'll be writing and I go, this is going to have to be broken up into 2 or 3 different articles. But no, I hardly ever am working on 3 articles at the same time, or even 2. Like I say, this latest one, that one you showed, that's currently the top one that's published on a website, that became part 1. I figured I was going to just put it all in one, And then once I was about, let's say 600 or 800 articles in, or words in, I realized, okay, this is going to be one of those ones where I break up into 2 or 3 parts. And now I do have a chunk of that written, probably about 400 words of part 2 written. But all I did was, I just picked it up, put it over there and in a new doc. So no, I hardly ever have multiple articles going at once. Now, again, because of the length of these articles, it's I don't know if it's easy, but I'll say it's easy to just say, all right, I'm going to finish this. I'm telling you, when I wrote songs, I learned to do that. I would lose confidence in what I was writing if I stopped and then I came back the next day. As a creative person, I guess, anything you're creating, for me, anything I'm creating, I can have a lot of confidence in it while I'm creating it. And I'm thinking, oh, that's pretty good. I like this. I'm going to keep going. And if I finish it, I'll often come back the next day and I'll go, yeah, that's pretty good. For some reason, if I don't finish it and I walk away, then the next day I'll look at it and I say, nah, I don't like that. And I'll just often scrap the whole thing. And what I'm saying is that hardly ever happens now with the writing. It used to happen quite a bit with songs.
Wow, this is fascinating, Dom, learning about your world of writing, I guess. And with a blog, one of the things that's real key is that first sentence, because that's going to be kind of up there describing an article usually, or at least something like the first sentence. And this article is very technical here, like you said, competition fishing standards and following different rules and things. And then, of course, you jump down to this article, Dog Days, and it's much more about weather and, human interaction with the environment. So it's fascinating. Yeah. I just want to point out, if people haven't caught this model here, is that Dom writes for free and he lets you have it. He's not selling you writing and books, but he has apparel, he gets sponsorships and things like that. So the apparel's over on the side, and that's what's paying for the writing. That's what paying for your time to be a writer. So it's kind of a new business model in the internet age that really readers can take advantage of and really benefit from, because they can read a lot of good writing without having to pay for it. But hopefully they buy a t-shirt or a hat or something sometimes too, right?
and telling you, the ad revenue is a huge part of it. When you click on those articles and you go through, you'll see ads at the top. You'll see Sims ads and Orvis ads, and that ad revenue, they're direct ad buys. And then I have affiliate links. I'll do gear reviews, and people have learned to, because I'm not pushy about it, so people have learned to really trust my advice. And if they buy a pair of waders by clicking through the link on my site, I'll get 10% of that sale, for example. That really adds up. And there's even the donation button. So back in March, I guess, right before COVID started, I added a donation button, which for a couple years, my wife was saying, I don't know why you don't have a donation button on there. She reads a lot of blogs for the things she's into. And she says, almost all of my blogs have a donation button. And I always thought, so what's the, hey, what's the point? Somebody's going to give me $2 or $3 or $4, and it's not going to add up to anything. Absolutely wrong. I was absolutely wrong. Now you have to realize that I have quite a readership. There's a good following now, good group of subscribers and readers, and a lot of support now for trout fishing. And they're very generous. The amount of donations that come in daily, weekly, is just way past what I thought would be possible. It pays for my car payment, put it that way.
Yeah, fascinating. Dom, I see another element to this world of writing, and that's where people can subscribe to your writing, so that your writing comes to them, or a notification of it comes to them on a regular basis. Whereas the average writer who puts a book in a store or on a website doesn't really reach out to people on such a regular basis. So you're always reminding them that your writing is being, expanded. You're writing about something new.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's stop that sharing there and go back here. Dom, here's a question. How do you create engagement for your readers? Do you, just try to cover all the bases so that you have a lot of different people, or do you decide that, some some fascinating thing about nature is going to draw them in. I'm just curious if you can tell us more about that, because I'm sure that's part of your thinking.
By engagement, you mean to get them involved in a dialogue?
No, engagement in terms of reading your writing. How do you get them to read your writing?
No.
Besides these mechanical ways, they like subscriptions and, you know,
Right.
pretty pictures.
To be interested in the content in the article itself.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that 90% of the, I'm making up a number here, but let's say 90% of the people that read Trout Fitting are very dedicated fly fishermen who we tend to be really into tactics. Okay. And so what I've learned is that it just so happens that the tactics that I really enjoy doing on the stream, I mean, the way we fly fish is actually pretty technical. Fishing itself can be, you know, it can be as simple as throwing a bobber out there and sitting on a park bench and beside the water and just relaxing. But that's not really how we fish. We're very, very technical about the way we fly fish. And to us, that's fun. And so what I've learned is that that's how most of my readers are too. And I'm saying that really there's a big group of fly fishermen out there who are just very, very hungry for information. And I think I present it well. Put it this way. I think what I learned in school and what I just have learned through writing and good feedback and even in negative feedback, people telling me, this didn't click, this didn't work for me. What I've learned is that if it's real dry, if you take these tactics, this technical writing, and you get, well, if you just put all the facts out there and all the leader formulas and the mechanics of how you should cast, you can get that information out there, but it's not entertaining and people won't finish the article. I myself am like that. If I'm reading something and it's not entertaining, I'm sorry, but I'm probably not going to finish the article unless I'd be required to by, you know, someone that was expecting something from me. Most people are coming to read the content, but be entertained. And what I really we talked about the story side and the technical side. I have tactics articles and stories articles. And I enjoy, well, the stories are actually harder to write. The tactics side is easier to write for some reason for me. But what I really enjoy doing is blending the two. And there's a lot of articles that I write where I try to entertain with part of the story, and then I will sneak in some tactics, or vice versa. It can be very tactic heavy, but then I'll sneak in some stuff. It just talks about what we love about fishing in the first place. We love being out there, the same as every outdoors person, and what we all enjoy about being outside and what nature gives to us. So that's only half of the game, is what we love about it. And the other half of it is the tactics stuff. And from the beginning, that's what Trout Bitten was about to me. So I continue to try to engage people by incorporating all of that.
Well, Dom, I'm going to throw not a curveball, but a fastball at you here. Can we go, well, let me see here. Let me get it open. Can we go to an article and you can give us a little, you know, take us to something similar to what you're talking about, where you have some technique, but also some nature stuff in it that you might be able to point out and even read a few lines to us if you would. Is that asking too much on the at the drop of the hat here?
Now I almost feel like I had control of the cursor, but go down to, keep scrolling down, please.
Okay.
Let's go to,
I'm not open on, there's Dog Days. You want me to go to a specific?
Yeah. You want me to read something that?
Read something that is an example of more technical writing.
You can even open that one up, please, if you would. Okay.
Yeah.
So, location.
I think I just click on the.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, that'll open up.
There we go. Okay, so there's the article.
There's an ad right there for Seagar, so it shows you how I'll get paid.
Okay.
When people click that ad, then if they buy the Seagar, honestly, so people will click that ad. I don't want to go on and on about this, but if you would click that ad, it would take you to Amazon. Or if you read the Trout Fin article, as you can see, it would take you to the article itself, which is a gear review. But if you click on and go through it, then it takes them to Amazon. Now, if they buy the $25 full of line, which I love, that's the only reason I wrote about it, I would get, I think it's 5% of that sale, which isn't much. But if they buy a TV from Amazon that day, then I get 5% of that sale. And that's how affiliate marketing works.
Wow. Wow.
Anyway, that's what I'm saying. That's where the profit is. That kind of thing. All right. So
Okay.
here, you know, I can say when the sun sets and the sky grows dark, the mysteries of a river deepen. Where are the trout and how are they feeding? These constant questions of the daylight fishermen don't change for the nighttime angler. The search for the answer continues. But under the veil of shadows, we are left to find clues among black water and quiet ripples. Now, let's say that that's a little bit poetic, or it's actually a little much for some people. My buddy Bill says, all that pretty stuff, I don't like that. He says, I just read the tactics stuff. But I like to, you know, put that kind of stuff in there. In the daylight, a good angler can pull trout from many different water types. He can pick over the risers in a long flat, or she can nymph the pockets and runs or cast long flies to bank water. Now, within that sentence, there's a lot of tactical information right there. Daylight trout can be persuaded a bit more. We can coax them into cooperation through secondary flats or side water while on our way to the next prime spot. Even that right there, I'm kind of trying to set up what happens while we go through a night of fishing, and at the same time try to indicate that, well, how I cover water. Saying that I can coax them into cooperation in all of this kind of water, in the secondary flats or the side water, which is not necessarily your best bet, while I'm on my way to a prime spot. And I guess what I'm trying to say is you can use, I don't want to say flowery, but you can use some language that is sort of, those sentences that I started with are storytelling kind of.
Whoops, Dom, we lost you there for a moment. Let's close that. I'm going to close out of the blog. That might help.
But we all right there?
We lost you for maybe a sentence or two, so
Oh.
I closed out of the blog. It says your bandwidth is low on your network, so we'll try to show a little less.
I hope those thunderstorms aren't coming through again.
Okay, talk fast like you have been.
I don't know, but yeah, I like to blend the two together. And when I write that way, and I bring the technical stuff in with the storytelling kind of language, those are the articles that people respond to most. They're also the most fun.
Yeah, and it reminds me, Dom, that you're a unique. Whoops, I'm getting some feedback there. You're a unique writer because you're highly skilled. You have the high level of technical skills in trout fishing, and you have the writing skills that you've developed, and largely through self-discipline. And the two are very essential for your success.
It is, and it became. I guess I've always been self-motivated, and when I say I'm going to do something, I make sure I follow through with it. That became even easier to do once I started seeing the revenue come in. And once all these streams of revenue started making a career out of the whole thing for me. And in 2017, beginning of 2017, I just really even dedicated myself even more to it. But yeah, that self-discipline is the key. And I do think what you said is true. I realized a while ago that I have a unique set of talents. I think there's a lot of good writers out there who haven't had the time really to fish as much as I have. I was a musician for 16 years. So I worked at night and I fished during the day. Then my kids were born too. That took away. Then I was daytime dad. But even when I was daytime dad, I took my kids out fishing a lot. I've had a lot of time on the water, and that's where understanding of the tactics and even stories to tell, that's where all of it comes from. It's just time on the water. And plenty of good writers have never had that kind of time on the water. So I have fallen into a lot of good situations.
Yeah. Hey, Dom, one more little practical question, and then we're going to get on to some questions about tips for the writers and listeners today and give them a chance to ask questions. So I'm just kind of curious if anyone ever says, hey, Dom, can I write an article for your blog?
Yeah, that's real common these days. I get a lot of canned questions. People do it all the time. They send out, I don't know, maybe they send out to 50 blogs at once and they say, hey, I'm a content writer and I write this kind of stuff. And I think my stuff would be great for your website. Occasionally I'll get one that actually looks like they would be good for my website, but very often it's just very general. They saw that I'm a website about fishing, and I mean, I'm a catch and release fly fishing site, and I'll be getting like requests to write saltwater articles, things like that.
Yeah.
But I also I've gotten plenty of people asking, and even some of my friends asking, you know, if they could write. And what I've done is no, I've kept trout bitten almost all of me. I think, well, early on, some of my friends did some articles. Austin wrote one for me, a technical one about a meat packing plant or company that's endangering the waters of Fishing Creek. I honestly didn't have time to do the research on that. So and Austin wanted to do it. So I had him do it and paid him for it and edited it and put it up. It blends right in. One of the reasons I love keeping everything as my own writing on Trout Bitten is it's very, very consistent. It's always my voice. It's just people know what to expect, and it's a very consistent product. And like we say, it's like one huge book.
Yeah, and you know, I'm thinking about that engagement element of your writing. You really become a friend and a fishing buddy to people through your voice. And yeah, you don't want to mess with that. But that does remind me, I wonder if people are wondering what a guide does, and we don't have time to go into this, but just you drive them to the stream and say, here, this is a good hole over there, you go to it, you know. Or
I should write an article on what a guide does, because I have a lot of, I coach baseball. A lot of my baseball family friends will often say, oh, you do like tours, you do fishing tours. And it's not like that. Very briefly, like I don't drive anybody to the stream. The day before I meet them, or I tell them where we're going to meet. I'm telling you, most of my clients are very into fly fishing, and they come to me because they've read on Trout Bitten tactics that they want to get better at. I do know a lot of the waters around here, and they hire me for that, to put them in places that are advantageous to catch fish. But really, Central PA is full of just gorgeous waters, full of wild brown trout. You can almost put your feet in any cold water and you're going to catch, well, you'll be over trout. It's not about spots as much as it is the tactics. So I meet them on the water. Let's say I guide on my terms, I say. So I really only guide from 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock. I did that early on. I said, if I'm going to guide, I'm going to do it my way. Most guides will guide in the evening or weekends. I don't do that. That was because I coach baseball in the evenings and on the weekends. But I meet them, and I don't fish, they fish. They usually have their own equipment because they're very into this. They come to me to learn specific tactics. I even turn people away now. I don't mind beginners, but people that are looking for me, like, put them on a big fish. That's not me. I don't market myself as that. I'm not the guy who's going to promise that you can catch a big fish with me. But I will promise people that I can teach them a lot about how to do nymphing tactics, how to fish dry flies or streamers better. So I stand behind them off their left shoulder if they're right-handed, and I give them advice, and I provide lunch, but it's just a sandwich. We talk a lot. I do become friends with these people, and I get a lot of people coming back and their friends. That's what a guided day is like. I'm standing there giving advice and then really trying to motivate a lot of times. It's teaching. It's teaching more than anything. And I've taught a lot of stuff through my life.
Yeah, well, and I agree, it's teaching. And you're not only teaching us about your work, but you're teaching us how to write better today. And that's where we got to go now. Some tips for aspiring writers. Some of these things you've kind of intimated, that discipline and writing till you're done with something. Yeah. But give us some more, if you would, especially about writing related to the outdoors, forest, wildlife, fish, and such, because you're talking to largely a group of foresters or people whose primary interest is forestry.
Yeah. So we touched on it earlier, but the reason I write about fishing well is because I know fishing. I keep on my phone, or in my phone, I use Google Notes. I keep, I'm kind of disciplined about this too, a long list. It's become a very long list of ideas. And I keep those notes. And when I'm out fishing, these, just ideas will come to me. Often when I'm guiding, I'm realizing, hey, this person doesn't understand this tactic, or I find day to day, lots of people don't understand what I'm saying. I need to say it different. I need to learn to communicate it in a different way. Or I find that, I don't know, something's working out on a stream, and I discover something. So I make these notes, and that's a way to never run out of ideas. I mean, I'll write, I got.
We're losing you there, Dom. Let's see what we can do. Dom, can you hear me at all? If you can, turn off your video, and I think we'll get better audio.
If you start a bunch of things, and you have, like Sandy was saying, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 articles at once. I also would say don't try to write a whole chapter of like a 10,000 word chapter, but decide that you're going to write a 500 word article. Maybe, yeah. We were often given, not as an English major, we were often told, hey, this needs to be 5,000 words. This needs to be 1,000 words or 500 words. That's a good way to look at it. And so set yourself some, if that's the goal, is to come out with a product that you could publish. Set yourself some goals like that, or some limits like that. Like that. Don't try to write a whole chapter in a night. Just decide, okay, I'm going to write 500 words tonight. As a musician, one more thing that carried over from writing songs to now writing art.
I have lost Dom's audio there again. Dom, can you hear me there?
It's easier to write an article than it is a song. But
okay. Hey, Dom, let me interrupt you for a moment. Can you put your video off? So click on your camera where it says stop video, and it'll put a line through it.
Yeah.
And that way, because we don't, I think we've seen you enough to imagine you speaking for a moment,
yes.
but we're losing some of your audio, or
okay.
Yeah, we're losing some of the audio, and the audio is most important.
Okay.
So can you just kind of quickly say what you were just saying a moment ago?
Yeah, I was saying that how far back, what's the last thing you heard me say there, Sandy? Sorry.
Oh, I was more focused on the audio, probably a minute or so.
I was saying that try not to make the goals too big for yourself. I would say if you're looking forward, or if you want to come out with that finished product, think about not writing the whole chapter, but think about having smaller goals like 500 words. Also, I think one of the last things I said there was when I was writing songs, I didn't say, okay, I'm going to set out to write a great song. I just decided I'm going to write a song. And so don't worry if it's going to be great or not. Just finish it. Just get something out there. And then you're going to realize this is something I can publish, or you'll realize, no, this is going to need work. But by completing things, then if the goal is to just finish the article, good. You may never show it to anybody else. But I think if we say, okay, I'm going to write something just fantastic, that's too much. So you take some of that pressure off of yourself by making it easier.
Mm-hmm. Dom, all right, great. Dom, sorry I'm hurrying, but I want to make sure I get some of these questions that people have written in. So somebody asked an interesting one here. Is there a sort of formula to blending the technical and the storytelling? So the poetic with the technique, do you have a formula you use for that, or is it sort of sandwich technique, or what do you do there?
Yeah, I like that question. I don't know if it's a formula as much as it's something that for me comes out naturally, and I hate to say that. That doesn't give good advice yet. But how about this? I will focus on one or the other. If I'm writing a tactics article, or let's say I'm writing a story, and within that story, there are some there are some things that I can squeeze some technical stuff into. For example, that night fishing article that I was reading parts of, within that storytelling stuff, there were some good keys in there with what water type to cover, with how long to stay in a piece of water. And I talked about bank water, side water, things like that. So within that storytelling, I try then, I'll think about what I'm doing and as I'm writing, and I will try to drop in that technical stuff. Or I could do it the other way. As I'm writing technical stuff, a lot of times I'll just kind of spew it all out on the paper. I just write it all, well, not on a paper, but on the screen. I type it all out, all that technical stuff. And then in the editing process, I'll go back and I will just drop maybe a paragraph of an example. If I'm writing a technical thing about how to cast a dry dropper rig in fly fishing, then that might have started as just a very technical article. And then as I'm reading it, as I'm editing it, I realize, well, this is getting a little dry. And now let me give an example. And so I will talk about Smith, for example, and I'll tell a quick paragraph or maybe 2-paragraph story about when I was with my buddy Smith teaching him how to cast dry dropper, this happened. Or, then we waded upstream and we saw these deer across the creek. And then, then we took a walk, and then we got back to the truck and this and that. And then you can get back to the tactics after that.
All right, a quick one here, Dom, or be quick on this one because there's maybe a meatier one after this. Is, do you ever organize, or how do you organize an article in your mind before you start writing? As you are writing, do you change its organization? Do you stay flexible on that kind of thing?
Sandy, can you repeat that?
Okay, so how is an article organized in your mind before you start writing?
Mm-hmm.
As you are writing, do you change its organization sometimes?
Yeah, sure. In my mind, I have a concept of what I want to write about. And let's say it's a tactical article, because that's where this kind of stuff matters. And I had plenty of classes and things that taught me how to write an outline. And I very much will do that if I know things are going to be long. But what I like to do is I like to let myself be creative as I write. So I don't follow an outline per se. But as I am writing and I come up with what I know is going to be sort of the next topic, the next header, I will write that down. I'll go down. Sometimes I even have a piece of paper beside me as I'm writing on the screen, in a word processing. I use Google Docs. I'll either have something beside me, or I'll just bump down and put the next header down there. I try not to lose ideas, put it that way. So I don't start out with an outline necessarily, but as I know what's going to need to happen next, then I don't want to lose that idea. I've lost too many ideas. So I go ahead and hurry up and put that in there. These aren't chapter length things that I'm writing. At 1,200 words, let's say on average, you're not going to have that many headers, that many cutoff points. So I very much like to enjoy that creative flow of writing. Writing is really my favorite part of everything I do. I think I enjoy writing not more than fishing, but just as much as fishing.
All right, then we're gonna stop right there. We're gonna have one more question, because this is a good one, Dom. You don't know this one, but I've thought about this, and someone has written in here, Dom, do you feel your writing has influenced the stewardship of the resource?
Sandy, I'm sorry, all I heard was of the resource.
Okay, the question is, Dom, do you feel your writing has influenced the stewardship of the resource?
Yes, yeah, and I enjoy that aspect of it. Not only do I'll do conservation articles. There's probably about 20 articles in the conservation header or category.
Okay.
And I know, for example, Penns Creek, we got the lower part of Penns Creek to be catch and release. And I say we because I can see how many people clicked through my link in the article to go and leave a comment with Fish and Boat Commission. And I've gotten feedback that, like, there are multiple times now where I've done that. And I know people that work for the Fish and Boat, and they say that, man, we got like a storm of emails coming in. And so, yeah, I enjoy that. The possible counterpoint to that is the more that I not expose, but the more that I write about fishing and get people excited about fly fishing, especially in central Pennsylvania, the more people are going to be out there doing it. And now we lose some of that privacy or that peace that we want on the water, because now there's more fishermen there. But I mean, for me, I just know what fishing and being outdoors has done for my life. So really my goal is to drive more people outside and onto the rivers and enjoy what it can do for their life like it has for mine. It's good for people.
Yes. All right, Dom. We're going to wrap it up here, but we really need a chance to see you again here. So turn your camera on. Hopefully we won't get any lightning or thunder in the meantime, but I just want to thank you so much for joining us. This has been fascinating. It's been mind-blowing to me, and I hope it was mind-blowing to others today to learn about this type of writing. The parallels between your career and our careers are somewhat similar. Forestry is a very technical thing. It can be very dry to write about, and yet we have to make it understandable to many people. Sometimes they're government officials or, they're non-forestry folks. Sometimes they are just citizens, that are going to be voting on issues and such. So we're in the same business, and yet we don't write enough, and that's the whole purpose of this class, this workshop series. So I want to thank you. I see some people have written in. Thank you too. Great discussion, and we're looking forward to reading your blog in the future. And even I signed up for it today. I think I just went to it every once in a while, so now I signed up for it because it doesn't cost anything. And and I'm not a fly fisherman, but maybe it helps to have a few regular people around. So somebody wrote, "I love your business model here too, and so great to hear from someone who loves to write. Thank you." Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. So we thank you, and also a basketball or a baseball coach, and a trout fly fishing guide too. So that you wear a lot of hats, but you do it well.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for this. It's an enjoyable thing. I do a lot of fly fishing presentations, and I, do in those presentations, we're talking fly fishing the whole time. But like I said, what I love most is writing. So it's a neat thing to talk about the writing itself.
Yeah, and I'll give a shameless plug for you, Dom. If anyone wants to use you as a guide, they just go to your site and contact you through that, right?
Yeah, that's easy. Yeah.
And so you can talk writing as Dom
that's true.
kind of corrects some of your bad habits of fly fishing. So a lot of thank you here, a lot of thank yous coming up here, and we thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Good day, everybody.
All right, you too. I hope you'll join us any other time as we go along here, and we've got another great writer coming up with Annie. So we'll see you soon.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Dom, you can close your video, and then you can hang tight there. You want to meet Annie and hear about her writing. Annie, are you up there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so we're going to shift gears here, and you have a completely different kind of career and another fascinating one. And sometimes with Zoom, we're told, after an hour, we give people a 2-minute break. Would you mind if we did that?
I think that's a fabulous idea.
Okay, so this is the time where you adjust your belt and you get up and you just focus on things that are further away than 20 inches or 18 inches, and then come back. So we're going to start here in 2 minutes. That would be like 11:03 or 11:04, and I mean business. I like to run on time. The mail must go through. So Annie, you hang tight and we can chat a little bit maybe, but otherwise we'll see everybody in 22 minutes. You can hang on if you want to, but I want to give you that chance to take a break so that our attention will be more focused again. Well, Annie, are you, so let's talk technical stuff here for a moment.
You bet.
With Dom, it's funny because he's right in Bellefonte, and yet, and he has a good internet connection, but things happen, and there are threatening skies down here in State College. I suspect it's worse up there, and so we could have some issues. But you seem to be coming in nice and clear. Do you know anything about the connection you're with?
It's about as good as it can be. I'm on a Wi-Fi connection, so I'm not directly into a cable, but we're right in the heart of Meadville, and it's There is a thunderstorm going on outside, but there's it's not super windy. I don't anticipate, knock on wood, but
Yes.
My farm lost Wi-Fi for a while. It's been spotty out there, but it's been good here. So.
Okay. Let me just. I think you might have observed this. So the best thing we can do is if you're freezing up on your video, or we're losing your audio because your video is trying to come through. If you notice anything, drop your video, because we will have seen you and met you already, and that way we won't miss the key stuff, which is the audio at that point.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was prepared to have to call in if I couldn't get a backup spot with Wi-Fi, so that's fine. Other thing I would say, I have my chat box open, and so you or Tracy or Sarah, if you just send me a private message through chat, if I'm freezing up and I can't hear you say you're freezing up, you could write it and I'll see it.
All right, and so I will try to find your name here.
Sure.
There you are as co-host. So I'm all ready to type you a private chat, but let's hope it doesn't happen. You know, I've had sometimes better internet connection with other continents than I have within town, within the town. You know.
Yeah.
So you don't know, and that was actually something we didn't talk to Dom about, but I know that some of his colleagues they spend some time internationally.
Yeah, that's right, because you said that he had a colleague from Patagonia who comes up.
Yeah, at least there's one that I'm aware of, and I think they are colleagues too. But that's Chile has a similar fishery, trout fishery to, and it's a winter thing, so that you would go down there in the winter because it's summer for them.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Annie, did you decide you want to share your screen a little bit? You did, great.
Yeah, I will a little bit. I have, and I bet folks are probably starting to join back in, but I have a few slides just to give a little bit of my forest background so that the participants understand my lens. And then I have a little bit of an overview slide of some of the things I'm going to talk about. And so I may jump back in and out of it a little bit. And then lastly, I have a few things I might end up reading that I have on the screen as a visual as well. So it'll be a little bit patchy. I will come in and out of shared screen as I see fit, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I see it's 11:04. Let's go till 11:05, and then we'll get going because I'm giving them even an extra minute. But
sounds good.
Everybody's come back. It'll help with the focus, to get.
Yeah. Now, Sandy, your background screen right now, is that on your property or a forest near you?
No, that is the Arboretum at Penn State, which has a patch of old growth in it. The Arboretum is 400 acres or so of land, and only about 50 of it is forested, maybe 60. And there's there's something called the Hartley Wood, which was the only little piece of land that wasn't owned by the iron furnace, and so it never was cut. Yeah. Okay. And so you can see some of the older white oaks there. And something just appealed to me about those two white oaks standing side by side. Sort of like, you can't help but imagine that they could have come off the same stump from years ago. I don't think so, though. They're a little farther apart. So they were just two acorns buried in a line, maybe. 300 years ago. The average age in there is 250 to 300 for the old ones. And there is a 360-year-old or two as well.
Wow.
I've done a few little videos on those, on the Arboretum, and its trees. That's why I had that as a shot for a video.
That's
okay,
great.
Folks, we are ready to go. And I want to introduce to you Annie Sochi Malone. Did I pronounce that right? Sochi? Is it?
Yeah, Sochi's great. And then Maloney.
Sochi Maloney. I'm sorry, I forgot the E.
Oh, it's fine.
Okay. And Annie is the executive director for a group called the Foundation for Sustainable Forests, which is located in, it'd be Crawford County, wouldn't it? Meadville, Pennsylvania. Yes. And Annie is a writer and a part-time instructor at Allegheny College, which is also in Meadville. And she'll tell us a little bit more about her background. She's also a speaker sometimes. And her writing activity is unique in every way compared to the other ones, I think, other writers that we've met. So it's going to be fun to learn more about your writing.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that introduction, Sandy. I wanted to Well, first, I just want to say hello to everybody. There's a big thunderstorm just wrapping up outside, and I'm in an unfamiliar boardroom because the internet on my farm was out this morning because of all the storms moving through. So I'm not in my natural habitat, but I hope that you're all doing well where you are. So I wanted to introduce a little bit about my background so that I know that I'm speaking to a number of foresters and people who do a lot of great stewardship work in forests. And I wanted to give you a sense of how I got started in both forestry and in writing. I don't often describe myself as a writer, but writing has always been an integral part of the work that I do. So I'm just gonna switch to a screen share just for a moment to give you that background and then get into some of the writing discussion. And so.
It says you're sharing. There we go. Now we got you.
Yeah.
Now do you want, there you go. Great. Good.
Yeah. So the most technical writing I've ever done was for academic style and scientific work. So I have a PhD in forest ecology from Boston University, and I did all of my research at the Hubbard Brook Experimental Forest, which is run by the USDA Forest Service. It's up in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And the body of my research was just for your information about this, part of a larger body of research called Colder Soils in a Warmer World. So understanding how changes in the winter snowpack impact forest nutrient cycling and processes, things like sap flow in sugar maples, that sort of thing. So that's part of my lens as a kind of more traditional forest ecologist, and then the technical writing that goes with that. The other part of my sort of forest story or forest background was I spent 15 years, not always the whole year, but for most of that time, I was year-round an expedition guide in the Boundary Waters of Minnesota, leading canoeing expeditions in the spring, summer, and fall, sometimes dragging canoes across the ice, and then leading dog sledding expeditions in the wintertime. And so I have this similar to Dominic, I have a lot of time in the forest in a recreational capacity. I feel really fortunate to have been able to do all of that before I sort of had to, you know, quote unquote, grow up and get a real job. And that has obviously influenced my sort of forest education, if you will. So I wanted to share that background as well. And I'll direct your attention, the one photo of me in the bottom center, I'm wearing a pair of beaver mittens that I made years ago, and proudly with Pennsylvania beavers that were trapped by my now husband, Pat Maloney. So Pennsylvania was often represented in my time there. But frankly, those beaver mitts were way too warm, and I could pretty much only wear them if it was 20 below or colder on a dog sled.
Annie, they look like Muppets, like Grover.
I know it. Yeah, they're absolutely crazy. They make a lot more sense. I've been up on Hudson Bay leading mushing trips, and they make a lot more sense up there. But it was kind of a fun thing. And for my participants, if anybody was on the verge of frostbite, that could pretty much cure it right away. So,
wow.
And so then where I am now, as Sandy said, I'm the executive director of the Foundation for Sustainable Forests, and I also teach occasionally at Allegheny College in the Department of Environmental Science and Environmental Studies. And I have taught at Allegheny College writing and speaking in an environmental capacity. So that's just a little bit of the background I have. And also I'll add right now that we have a young family. We live on 150 acres of woods and farm here in Crawford County. And we've got a sugar bush. We just do all kinds of little hobby farming. So the Foundation for Sustainable Forests serves a lot of small private woodland owners. And my husband and my son and we're small private woodland owners as well. So it's interesting that I'm often writing for an audience that I'm also a part of through the foundation. So that brief background, I don't want to talk about myself the whole time, but I just thought as foresters, it might help you to know that I don't have a traditional forestry background, and yet my job now is to promote sustainable forestry and to try to reach for private woodland owners to think about managing their woods thoughtfully.
Annie, you better tell us a little bit about the foundation, because
yeah.
I'm sure people need to know to make that connection there. Yeah.
I'm ready for you, Sandy. So
okay.
Just a quick slide here with
Good.
This is the only one, but the mission of the foundation is to protect forested land and support rural communities through working forests. So yes, we follow somewhat of a land trust model, but it's really important to us that the forests we protect remain an active part of the community. So we continue to, they're on the tax rolls, and they are all active working for us, so providing jobs for the community. And then also in the process of our conservation efforts, we want to raise awareness of the importance of keeping forests intact, keeping working forests as part of this rural economy, and then also highlight sustainable forestry practices. Now that last part, I know I'm speaking to foresters, and I do want to add a little disclaimer that as I'm sharing some of my writing or talking about some of the way that I write about forestry, please don't get too bogged down if you don't agree with the forestry approach that I'm writing about. I just want to make that really clear. I think that some of my experiences can be useful to you in your own writing, but I don't want to lose my audience if you simply don't agree with the Foundation's way of managing forests. So that's my disclaimer there.
Sure. Annie, just to be clear, does your foundation do easements and preservation kind of work?
We do conservation type of work, and easement is a more common typical land trust model, but because it's really important to us to be able to manage the forests that we protect, most of our properties are actually owned, they're fee simple ownership. And the one easement that we do have, the landowner donated the timber rights to the Foundation, and we work in partnership with him, obviously to make sure that he's comfortable with the work that we're doing on his property. But it doesn't help us accomplish our mission if we can't actively manage the woods that we have protected. So
great.
That's why we don't quite fall into a traditional land trust model, but we do conserve land. Yes, we've conserved about almost 2,000 acres to date. So I'm going to end the screen share for just a moment. Well, maybe not. So I'll just go to this slide, and then I can come back to discussing a little bit. But this is just an overview. As I said before, I don't often think of myself as a writer. But I am, and I think of myself really as a functional writer. So in my work at the Foundation, I will end the screen share for just a moment so that I can talk to you. So as a writer, for the Foundation, as I said before, my job is to try to reach a fairly broad audience, but primarily private woodland owners. And my guess is that as foresters, many of you are similarly trying to reach that audience. And then the other audience, of course, is people like you, that we want to try to kind of work together and come together to figure out what is the best way to manage Penn's woods both now and for the future, and to think about the future resilience of our Commonwealth's forests. So there's a lot of different ways that I accomplish that, through either more formal writing and formal pieces, or through informal writing in some of the Foundation's publications, and informal communications and also brochures and things that we create for landowners. So one of the challenges that for writing about forestry that I encounter all the time is how to make the case for active management to an audience that believes that doing nothing is the best way to be. So there's folks who follow a fairly traditional forestry model on their land. They kind of think about, maybe let's say a 20-year harvest cycle, and they think about getting that kind of payoff like every 20 years or so. And that's kind of enough for them. But then there's also a pretty large subset of woodland owners who kind of who don't do very much. They value the recreation and beauty of their property, but they're a little afraid of entering into active management. And so I find it a fun challenge, but a challenge nonetheless, to try to reach that audience and try to help make the case. So I'm just going to go back to screen share for a moment to explain what I mean. But so let me just get the slideshow up again. This is a slide that I often use in different presentations or various versions of this, but I try to present to the audience this is a slide, just to clarify, I actually used this at a presentation at the Pennsylvania Land Trust Association conference. So I was speaking to a room full of land trust staff members and stewards who own collectively in Pennsylvania, either have ownership or easements on a lot of acreage in Pennsylvania, but often are afraid to dabble in active management because of, let's face it, there's public relations issues, forestry is messy, there's a lot of issues associated with it. And so we wanted to present to that audience to make the case about how forestry is a proactive opportunity to improve forest health. So this slide is meant to demonstrate there's a lot of different threats to our forests: climate change, invasive plant species, invasive pests that threaten specific species. For example, the photo in the center you probably recognize is a dying ash tree that is being killed by the emerald ash boring beetle. Pennsylvania's deer herd doesn't help in terms of the next generation of trees because of overbrowsing of native plant seedlings on the forest floor. And then of course, land use change itself is another issue. Now, management is circled there because, as you well know, management can either be a threat or it can be an improvement to the condition of your forest. So the case that we like to make is that the two things that are below the dotted line on this slide are the things that we potentially have an opportunity to control and have a positive impact on, whereas the things above us, yes, we as a society, we're trying to control those things, but on the ground as land managers, we don't have a lot of control. So management, we try to create the case through our writing, my writing, that management is a proactive opportunity. It's a tool that we can use to improve a forest condition. And that it's a bit of an opening of a door to woodland owners who have previously been hesitant, let's say, to enter into active management. Or for landowners who have always followed a more kind of traditional harvest cycle and never really thought about forestry as an opportunity to improve the future forest. So I'll just go back, I'll keep this slide up for a moment, but so some of the other challenges are overcoming prevailing sentiments and images in the media, right? So as I said before, forestry often looks messy, the aftermath, there can be mud can be made, there's treetops on the ground, and a lot of the lay public doesn't understand how the forest might bounce back from that. If you're a landowner, you're kind of just fixated on the visual of what it looks like. And so part of my writing is also to educate the public about, well, treetops represent potentially natural deer fencing for a short period of time as native regeneration has a chance to get a competitive advantage over, basically because deer, they're, fairly lazy and they're not gonna wanna dig into down treetops to get to that regeneration. So there's examples like that where through the writing, we're working on trying to address those stigmas. And then the last one, and this is one that's kind of an emerging, I've become more aware of this in the last year or two, that whenever I'm writing about forestry, and this maybe gets into some of what Dominic talked about technical forestry, or technical writing rather, there is a language for forestry. You are all, I'm sure, very well versed in it. But the language itself is can be fairly industrial or commodity centric. And again, if you're trying to reach an audience that has a lot of biases against the idea of forestry, their goals are more conservation oriented than financial oriented, that language can be somewhat alienating or can be a disconnect for them. And so I find it an interesting challenge to either embrace that language and redefine the terms, or come up with a new language to better describe what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And the tools that are listed at the bottom of the slide are kind of a nod to that. So maybe we're reinventing the language, and then also, just as Dominic had talked about, the kind of interweaving of story with the technical writing to help make things more relatable. So I'll stop the share for a moment here.
Annie, tell us what you mean by curating stories. Maybe you're going there now.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So for curating stories, I got this idea from the Pennsylvania Land Trust Association. They had created a document that was a collection of stories. And I know that the Center for Private Forests has done the same, where they have curated different landowner stories about why they appreciate their land, why they care about their land. And in the case of the PA Land Trust Association, it was to make the case for long-term conservation of their land. The stories that I curate do also tend towards why people have decided to place some sort of protection on their property long term, but they also present the case for why these landowners have chosen active management and what they have seen as a result. And so my goal there is, there's so many different sort of flavors of landowner. There's so many different ways in which different landowners connect to their land. My hope is that by curating these stories and presenting them to our audience periodically, typically through newsletters and eventually in a collection, that the reader will eventually connect with one of those landowners or more of those landowners and start to be able to picture their own land and what their own goals for their land are. So the curating of story is meant to make everything, make these concepts more relatable, more accessible, and give the chance for the landowner to picture themselves in that story.
Gotcha, thank you.
Sure, yeah. And I hope, I just want to say to all of you out there, I hope that my focus on private landowners as an audience isn't losing you as an audience. So I have the chat box open if you want to offer any comments on that. But I'm just speaking sort of to the audience that I have to serve the most.
Annie, just to qualify that, that's not the case. So don't even worry about that, because all of our writers have different audiences, and we're focused on writing really, and everybody's got an audience, and they have to think about that audience. Right,
which is, I mean, that's one of the key points I had written down, is the importance of knowing your audience, and writing to that audience, not writing to where I'm comfortable, but writing to where my audience is comfortable. And sometimes that's a challenge, but it's a really, really important one to keep in mind. Yeah. I have a excerpt from a story that the national renowned author Wendell Berry wrote about the foundation a few years ago. And I'm not only going to use examples of my own writing, but I'd love to use that as an example of some of the things that I've talked about. Can I pull that up?
Sure you can, yeah. You should have permissions, yeah. Just like you did.
Go ahead. I'll do it.
Okay.
All right, so.
You'll want to close the PowerPoint, unless it is a PowerPoint slide, is it? Or
it's a PowerPoint slide. Yeah.
There you go. Okay, great.
Yeah. So it's in a collection of essays called Our Only World. It's by Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry's, if you're not familiar with his writing, one of his most famous books was back in the 1970s called The Unsettling of America, and all about the sort of the return back to agriculture during the time period there. And he has he lives in Kentucky, and he's predominantly written about traditional agriculture and farming, but he became familiar with the Foundation for Sustainable Forests through an organization that's closer to his home called the Healing Harvest Foundation. And he's come up to this area twice now to present at Foundation for Sustainable Forest conferences. And we were fortunate enough that he included the short story in a collection of essays in 2012 that is about Troy Firth, our founder, and about the organization. So I pulled from this short story these two paragraphs that I would love to read, and then I've got a couple points on them. But he writes, "The best logging, however, we may rightly call culling. The forester's name for it is, quote, worst first single tree selection, unquote. By this method, the trees in the area to be logged are looked at individually, evaluated according to standards of worth and health, and the worst are carefully removed, leaving only small openings in the canopy, and doing the least possible damage to the trees, young and old, that remain, and the forest floor. The worst are trees that are diseased or dying, leaning trees that are more likely to fall as they grow more top-heavy, trees that branch too low are otherwise inferior in conformation. But I need to interrupt myself here to notice that my need to be clear has led me into oversimplification, which, as a side note, this is Annie speaking now. I'm glad he says that. A stand consisting of only the best trees would be a tree farm, not a forest. A healthy forest would necessarily include some less valuable or unmarketable species and some diseased and dying trees, so as to sustain the finally unimaginable diversity of creatures that belong to the natural forest. Good foresters know this and are charitable towards members of the forest community that are, by the standards merely of economics, would be considered worthless." So I'll leave it up here for a moment as I discuss it, but I pulled this out because I'll say that, first I'll say, as a forester, some of his writing probably makes you cringe or might make you cringe. I don't want to assume. And he does tend towards oversimplification, and knowing what I know about the Foundation's approach to forestry, it is an oversimplification, but his goal here is to reach an audience of non-foresters. And I can attest to how effective his writing is, because every year that I've worked for the Foundation, we've always received a handful, maybe a dozen or so, random one-time donations from around the country, not just here in Northwestern Pennsylvania, of people who read his book, read this essay, and what he said really resonated, and they wanted to support the Foundation as a result. So whenever I've engaged directly with those readers, they're almost never forest professionals. They never have been, to my knowledge. So his writing is accessible to the non-forester. And what I like about what he's done here is he kind of takes control of the language. So as I said before, when you're writing about forestry and the idea of conservation or restorative forestry, as I do, it's hard sometimes to work within the sort of industrial vocabulary that it dominates the language of forestry. And I like that he takes a moment to define his terms of, what does it mean to be a worst tree? What does it mean to be a best tree? And that he makes it clear that he's not just thinking in economic terms. And I just have a couple of notes I want to look at here. I think as a professional in the industry, if you're trying to reach this audience, you're going to have to maybe just work hard to separate yourself from the comfort that you have with the typical terms and figure out different ways to say it that can be accessible to the lay public, to the lay person.
Annie, could I interrupt here for a moment
Sure.
to just suggest something? So your technical academic training and job experiences, which relate to forestry, have certainly taught you the jargon of forestry. Yet, what I hear you saying is, of course, you write to your audience, and in your case, you're writing, the language you need to use is as that of a peer. And you are a peer because you're a peer landowner, but it sounds like the peers want to hear the way their peers talk, or can understand it the way their peers talk. So their peers know more about forests than the average guy on the street who doesn't own forest land. But the language is still using common words that most people would understand, but they're ones that the peers would use to talk about. Is that what you're?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely see it as trying to meet the reader where they're at, and then potentially bring them along to where I'm at, or to where I want to get them to be. And sometimes that means taking a moment to define terms very specifically. Like, here's what I mean when I say forest resilience, for example. There's a lot of buzzwords, right? The word sustainable itself is a buzzword, and I catch myself sometimes using it, first, too much, but second, using it without clarifying what do I really mean about that. And in many cases, I mean sustainable from an ecological perspective, but also sustainable from an economic perspective. Because in my work, as I think is true in industry, we're trying to find that magical medium between what people need from the land and then what the land needs from us to maintain a healthy forest now and in the future. So, but if I don't take the time to define what I mean when I say sustainable in any given context, I'm probably going to lose people to a buzzword. Eyes will glaze over, and they'll make their own assumptions about what it means.
Yeah. Another buzzword might be regeneration, which has
For sure,
it's a verb,
yeah.
It's a verb, it's a noun, it's all sorts of things.
Right. And it's a technical term. If I haven't defined it, that's a problem. Yeah.
I think everybody's probably tracking with you on this, so I don't want to. But if people do think of some words that they've found that the audience, let's say the audience of landowners, stumble on, just write them in the chat there. It might give you something to do while you're listening, and just write a single word in the chat there. It would be interesting to see. And be helpful.
And I'm glad you used the term stumble, because that reminds me of another thing I wanted to mention. So just an excerpt sentence from, Howie Wurzbacher has a good one.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Go ahead, Annie.
Another sentence that was in Wendell Berry's short story that I often pull out from my use with the Foundation is, a forest kindly used will outlive unimaginably any of its trees. Now, I really like that sentence because it it does help people to see the relationship between a tree and a forest in a way. But I also think, as Dominic, when Dominic read one of his excerpts, one of his blogs, and he said, this language is a little bit too poetic for some. Well, Wendell Berry's writing might be the same for some. And the term kindly used can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. So I like the sentence, but at the same time, whenever I use it with the foundation, I try to provide context. What do we really mean by that? What do we really mean by kindly used? And I bring it up here because you mentioned what are some of the things that landowners stumble on. I think one of the biggest problems that I encounter is we convince a landowner to try out active management. Maybe we have a service forester come out and walk the property with them. We'll recommend that they get a DCNR service forester out there who will make some recommendations, or they hire a consulting forester. I think there's a little bit of a romanticization, I think it can be romanticized of what forestry will do for your forest long-term versus what it might look like right after the job is done. So that's something that I also have to be careful about in my writing, that I don't paint a picture of rainbows and unicorns. And then, like I said before, when there's a little bit of mud or some treetops left behind, they feel like they have been cheated or misled. And so I try to make sure that I incorporate some of the grit that is forestry into my writing, so they understand that comes with it, but it's a short-term issue where the net benefit in the long term is worth it.
Yeah, there's the good and the bad, and then there's always a little ugly.
Yeah, I'm seeing some more technical, industry terms or technical forestry terms: silviculture, relative density, mensuration.
Yep.
Those are all good ones.
Mm-hmm. And people are being shy too, but that's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you mentioned stories before. I did put up a couple of slides of a couple of the stories that I've curated. I just thought while we're still relatively fresh on that subject, I would share them, and I won't necessarily read the whole story, but just show as an example. So I'll go back into the screen share. And
all right, Annie, after you do that, I want to ask you that question that I like to focus on too, is what's your process for writing?
Oh, sure. Okay, let me just show you
that.
Yeah, no problem. Let me just show you these real quick. And I will say, so again, this is not my writing. I promise I do have examples of some of my writing, but we had a magical intern from Allegheny College, and she was this wonderful combination of environmental studies major and wanting to be a journalist. And so for one semester, her role as an intern was to curate landowner stories. So she interviewed about 7 or 8 people that are within the foundation community, some of our members, some of our land donors, and curated their stories. And she did a wonderful job. So this woman is Jane Woods, is a retired dentist from the Meadville area. She lives up in the Erie area now, but she had a property near Corry, Pennsylvania, which is in Erie County, that she had managed using the foundation's approach for a couple decades, and had long thought about donating the property. And last year, she made this huge, very generous leap of donating her 144 acres to the foundation, which is a big deal, and entrusting it in our care. It had been in her family for, I think, about 80 years. And in this excerpt from Ellis's writing, in our conversations, Jane used the word treasure to help describe her wooded land and her songbirds, hemlocks, and Halloween tree, which she references earlier in her writing. She treasures the memories of experiencing the diversity of plant and animal life in her family's woods, the profound peace and beauty of each season. My time here began before rural properties were being subdivided and their farming fields and woods fragmented, she said. But I've also had enough years now in working with Troy Firth and the foundation to see their astute observations and forest management work with nature to benefit and protect the whole ecosystem. She remains resolute as a landowner that what is best for the woods comes first. Aided by the foundation's management, a new forest of hardwoods emerges in the stand of declining, in this case, was red pine trees that her father once planted. So in the case of this story, I can almost guarantee that half of our readership reads this story and their eyes gloss over, because this is not the kind of landowner that they are. But then I can also guarantee that there are other landowners who this really resonates with them. The idea that they want to do right by the forest and they want to put the forest first. And frankly, they're in a fortunate enough position that they can afford to do that. They can afford to get less of a payout from their land in order to steward that land more carefully. And the flip side to that, the only other story I've created a slide about is a fellow named Clarence Clear who lives in Warren County, who he sold a portion of his family's woods to the foundation as a bargain sale several years back. But he's much more of a functional landowner. He very little, whenever I talk to him, he's not a poetic man. He's actually kind of a tinkerer and a hobby inventor, which is kind of interesting. But in the case of this writing, I'm only just going to read the first few sentences, but Ellis, this is her whole story actually, is on the slide. And it says, Clarence Clear is a thinker, period. I call his brain the primordial ooze, said Clarence's wife, Deb. Even when he's on his way to sleep, it comes. So Clarence has been exposed to the woods all his life. So she goes on to talk about, he does not describe himself as an outdoorsman. He enjoys hiking and spending time alone in the woods, and he has a clear vision for his land and a conservation-oriented way of thinking that extends into his many creative adventures. A thinker, no doubt a tinkerer and inventor, Clarence has used his career experiences in the heating industry to reimagine products and systems. So the reason I selected this piece, it resonated with the first session in this workshop. I'm trying to remember now if it was Van who talked about how sometimes you have to write about something that you're not inherently passionate about. And so you've got to find that sort of sub-theme or sub-story within the story that you are passionate about and focus on that in order to write a good piece. And I think that's what Ellis did here. I think she was having trouble capturing or getting excited about this kind of run-of-the-mill land conservation story. And so she instead really focused on Clarence as this really interesting character. And I can tell you from the responses that I got in the newsletter and from our membership after this was all done, that people really liked that. They really liked being able to connect with Clarence through that story. And it's not flowery writing. It's not overly about conservation per se. So I just wanted to offer those two examples of what it means to curate stories and how you can use them as a tool to reach your audience.
Sure, and different types of audience, right? I mean, within your audience, you have some that are going to like that kind of story and some are going to like the more technical or whatever.
Right, that's right. Yeah, there's a quote that has guided my life for a long time that I learned it in Latin class in high school. It says, a friend to everyone is a friend to no one. And I just like that idea that if in one piece of writing you try to please everybody, you're going to please nobody. And so it's taught me to be a little bit more bold and not to be afraid to have a bold point of view in order to accomplish the message that I'm trying to get across or the audience that I'm trying to reach. But if I can diversify my writing, I may be able eventually to reach people at different times in different ways. But I no longer try to please everybody in one piece of writing. Right.
So let's jump to the process for writing for you, Annie. And did you say you do have some of your own writing you want to share too?
Yeah, I do have a little bit of it, yes.
All right. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your process. Are there any particular tools or methods that you use?
Yeah, so first of all, and I think this might resonate with this audience, taking the time to write creatively for my work requires a mindset shift. If, for example, on any given day where I might have been working on a grant or doing data entry for our accounting, for our budgets, that sort of thing, writing is obviously, it's a different part of the brain. It's just a different mindset. And so I do whatever I need to do to change my energy, change the scene if I have to create the space to be creative in my writing. So often when I'm writing for the foundation, there's a particular topic that I have selected for whatever reason that I know I want to write about. And it's not uncommon for me to step away from my desk, literally go for a walk in the woods, grab the dogs, go up to our sugar bush, take a walk, and use that time to clear my head of Excel spreadsheets and grants and emails, and just let my own mental stream of consciousness help me get an idea that I can get excited about. And so in the last session, there was a talk about sort of making sure, or there was talk of creating a hook to your piece, right? And once you have that hook, from there you can flow. And so in my own process, that's often the same. It's important in my writing that and I think it's important to the members of our organization that read this writing that they know me a little bit. Again, it's not all about me, but if they know me a little bit, they know where I'm coming from, everything else that I'm going to say makes a little more sense. So the two pieces of writing that I do have to share, I've been trying to begin with a hook that is also personal about me and where I'm coming from before I then get into the topic that I was choosing to write about. So I think that's definitely part of my process, is changing the scene, creating the mental space to be creative. For some of you, that might be sitting down and writing as a stream of consciousness. If you're familiar with that term, where you commit, I've heard other people in this workshop talk about this, where you just commit to writing for 5-10 minutes. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be edited, but you're just letting the words flow. And sometimes that can bring a clarity that you didn't expect. For me lately, because I have such a desk job, I'd rather do that by walking through the woods and being physical, and then my ideas will come. And then from there, and this comes back to the question that was asked earlier about what's your formula for mixing technical writing with story. From there, I'm gonna, just as other writers have said, I'm gonna write a piece till it's done, whether I like it or not, and then I'm gonna come back and read it and make sure that it has flow. So when that question was posed earlier about the formula, the only word that came to mind for me, and I wrote it down, was flow. So am I successfully flowing smoothly between story and technical, or story and a message? You know, basically I'm using story to get a point across. And so actually this is a good time to jump back to the screen share, because I provided an example of one of my earlier pieces of writing for the foundation that I don't think I was particularly successful. So I thought I'd share that to start. Yeah,
that's great. And it's a fascinating, you're building on what we've been learning, Annie.
Good. That's good. So this is fall, winter 2016. Okay, so at this point, I have not quite been working for the foundation for a year. Knowing what I know now, I can honestly say I didn't quite even understand every aspect of the foundation. So there's a learning curve there. But I did start, I'm happy, I will say I started with a hook that I was happy with, but you'll see where I take it. So this is just my message on the front page of our newsletter. Goes out to a modest readership of like 200, 250 people in print mail, and then a larger email list. But so on a recent Sunday afternoon, my partner and I headed over to his partner's house, or his parents' house, for a visit. Enjoying the fall breeze, we piled into the truck with homemade corn muffins, a chainsaw to trim the yard trees, and barrels for cider apples. As we lumbered along the road, he pointed out his old stomping grounds. That's the old swimming hole we used to go to. Later, the wood's edge by that field was great for trapping fox. And because making syrup has always been dear to his heart, that patch there would make a dandy sugar bush. I'm not making this up. My husband says these things all the time. It's great. As we approached his childhood home, he declared, "Last we spoke, the neighbors were thinking of doing a cut in their woods. I'll stop over and see what they've decided." Well, our fine spirits were about to change. The neighbors had hired a logger who would do a high grade of a forest, removing the healthiest trees for timber and leaving those trees in the worst shape behind. And in this case, it was a pretty severe high grade. Their decision was hard to hear. It is their land, of course, their wishes must be respected always, but this woods was enjoyed by my partner's family for years, so it also felt deeply personal. For a landowner, it's hard to ignore the short-term earnings of a heavy cut, but as you know all too well, this approach can also do long-term damage to a healthy ecosystem. With our forests so vulnerable to invasive species and disease, it could be downright devastating. And then this last paragraph, I go into more of this sort of preachy land trust rhetoric. Unfortunately, this scenario echoes across the region all too often. It makes the foundation's mission even more urgent. So this is where you as a member come in. We need your help through contributions to support land protection and as ambassadors to friends and neighbors. Together, we can ensure that woodland owners who are concerned about the future of their land know and understand their options. So I have a little bit of a self-critique here of this piece. So yes, I believe I was successful in having personal touches and a hook. I created, Claire talked about this last week about, using imagery. So I created this image. We're bouncing down a rural road as a family. We clearly value the natural area and what it has to offer, collecting cider apples, trapping, making maple syrup, that sort of thing. So I incorporated that storyline, but in part because I was limited by space, but also because I just didn't do it well this time. It was too rapid a transition from story to preachy. So the flow, in my opinion, upon reflection wasn't there. I also feel like I used some vilifying and fear tactics to an extent, sort of vilifying that logger, that an unnamed logger, and in a way vilifying the forest industry, which I've since, as I've developed through the foundation, I want to be really careful not to do that, because it's really important. I don't want to do that. That's not going to help in Pennsylvania's forestry situation. And so I sort of regret some of the ways that I have incorporated that into my earlier writing. What I do, though, at the end is, even though it is preachy and it doesn't flow well by my own standard, my own reflection, I do incorporate these calls to action. So yes, support the foundation if you can, but also fellow landowners and neighbors really are the best ambassadors of our mission by talking to their neighbors and their friends and family. So I incorporated that as well.
Annie, this is fascinating. You sort of did a self-critique here, and it kind of relates to the last question, which is, you know, what are some techniques that you and tips you want to share with people, aspiring writers in our group? You know, here you've done a self. Did you ever have people reading your writing? Did you get feedback in that way, sort of workshopping what you wrote, or you know, are there other suggestions you have?
So yes, I certainly have. I always have somebody at the very minimum, depending on the deadline for what I'm doing, I at the very minimum have somebody read the piece for polish, right? But more often and ideally, I do have it in a little bit of a workshopping context. So one of my peers that I consult with often is Guy Dunkel, who some of you may know based on the names I can see. Guy is a forester who is on the board of directors for the foundation and one of its primary land managers. So as a forester, I want his perspective when I'm writing these pieces for the foundation. I want to make sure that I'm being true to forestry and being true to industry. I don't recall if I had him read this or not, to be honest. It was a while ago, but he's one of the voices that I want to make sure that I've connected with. And then occasionally I will also ask, you know, another either trusted member or trusted landowner for their opinion or their view on it. But I truly believe in that workshopping context. I can't tell you how many times when it comes to polish, I'll read a piece myself, particularly on a screen, and miss really simple grammatical errors or punctuation errors or that sort of thing. Sometimes you're blinded by your own writing. And then as a technical piece of advice, it's much, much more effective to proofread a piece and read a piece and physically holding a piece of paper than it is to read it on a screen. I can't tell you why, it's just true. So before you're sending something off to the printer, print it and read it. Take it outside, take it to a different setting, and you'll be surprised by what you see that you couldn't see from the screen. So to continue to answer your question, Sandy, I'm going to take you to a piece of writing that is a little bit less cringy for me upon reflection.
Okay, and if you would, there's a question that came in, and it may relate to this. It kind of relates to the other pieces. Paul writes in to say that it seems like a significant part of your writing involves persuading people to have shared values. Any advice on how to do that more effectively, or the challenges therein? So, you know, maybe touch on that as you're sharing.
Yeah, I would be.
You're going to show that other writing?
I will. I'll come back to it, but I thought I'd answer the question
All right.
first.
We have about 4 minutes, so you.
I got this. I can do this. Okay. So, Paul, to address your question briefly, I think persuasion is an interesting word, because I would prefer to think, how do I say this? Persuasion can only get a person so far if you're not actually embracing your audience's, their own values. So I prefer to think of it as empowering. I prefer to think about it as giving them an opportunity to think differently about their situation, about their woods, and empower them to think differently and challenge the status quo. So yes, of course that includes persuasion, but like I said, I believe that persuasion kind of only takes you so far. And so by trying to meet the audience where they're at and provide these different perspectives, I'm hoping that they will find something that they can sink their teeth into and see themselves in these values. So I'll just go back last slide to.
Yep, that's great.
This piece here. So in this case, and you know what, just for time's sake, I'll go ahead and pull up my self-critique at the same time. So this I wrote in the fall of 2018. It was, at this point, my son was
born in June.
Yeah, he was 12 months, he was 5 months old at this point. So I'm kind of fresh off maternity leave, but it's been a big year for me and my family. Our son Rowan was born in June and has been mostly making us grin ever since. In the months leading up to and following his arrival, we received much wisdom and advice from friends and family, including many of you, our readers. For example, I was told to get as much sleep as I could whenever I could. I should have listened. I was cautioned that my life will never be the same. This is also proven true and is fine with me. But one resonant refrain that appeared in greeting cards and gifts was, quote, "From a small seed, a mighty trunk may grow." So I'm going to pause here to say that I really, that was my hook. That's what got me excited about writing this piece. I knew I wanted to write something that involved the birth of my son, because it's obviously a big part of who I was now, even as a staff member of the foundation. And I tried to incorporate that metaphor as I continued. So at 5 months old and already wearing size 12 months clothes, Rowan is well on his way to being mighty indeed. Similarly, at 14 years old, with so many new projects and partnerships in the works, so is the Foundation for Sustainable Forests. I have pondered this phrase quite a bit these last few months as it relates to the foundation. Initially established as a smaller family trust in 2004, it has certainly grown substantially since the Firth family's initial seed was planted. And in fact, from my vantage point, I see a trunk forming strong and true. So I'll pause to say this particular piece is not actually about forestry so much as about the organization, but I think there's some points here that could absolutely apply.
Sure, no worries about that.
Yeah, so there's personal touches, there's incorporating a storyline. I have this metaphor, and as I continue the metaphor, I shift the focus to the reader. So maybe, Paul, this is where that persuasion comes in. I said, if we explore this metaphor, what is fueling the trunk's growth? And the answer to this question is the key to understanding how to continue to foster the foundation's growth sustainably and intentionally. When I ponder this question, the answer is invariably you. Sure, there are many different resources required for any tree to grow. Water, light, nutrients are all essential elements to growth and can be compared to the physical and material resources required by the foundation. But any two trees given the same resource will not respond exactly the same way. And there are determinants of growth that scientists struggle to measure. So I get a little technical there. In our case, I firmly believe that you are the unquantifiable element supporting the foundation's development into a vibrant organization as vigorous as the forests it manages. So, and I won't go into the rest because it kind of just gets into more of this, give us support, continue to support the mission. But I do believe that this is a more successful example of weaving story with technical, using the metaphor as a relatable and understandable refrain throughout, while still getting these points across. But it does end with those calls to action.
Yeah, Rob's asked here, how often do you use quotes, photos, punctuation, font changes, exclamation points, etc., to get a point, I guess, a point across? I have to go to the chat there. So yeah, last question there.
Sure, yeah. Those are great. That's a great question. I find I'm a little bit too exuberant with my exclamation points, so I've had to edit a bit because I don't want to come across as just being bouncy and naive in my writing, but at the same time, I do find that some of those informalities are effective for this particular audience. I definitely use quotes. I just find that they often are centering and inspiring, and I can't always be as a writer, I would love to think that I can always come up with a quote that's going to be that, so-called green line that Claire referred to, but sometimes I prefer to lean on other writers by providing that outside inspiration.
Yeah, thanks, Annie. That was a beautiful quote to share with us and to show us how you use your writing so, eloquently and in such an applied way with such a specific audience as just those landowners. It's great to see that. Is that going out digitally now, or do you still do hard copies of all that?
We do both. So we send out about 200 hard copies, but our digital mailing list is, I think, around 800. So you can go to our website and sign up if you want to receive.
Our foundation, the people receiving it, is that a free thing, or they have to be a member of the foundation? Is that a membership?
Excuse me, if it's electronic, it's free. You can just sign up.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we are going to wrap it up here. Annie, thanks so much. Please hang in there with us for a few moments because questions may come in, and we can always run a little bit over. Jared is going to tell us about what's going to happen in 2 weeks. We've got 2 more writers joining us. Jared, go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Sandy. Appreciate it. First of all, I just want to say thank you again to Dominic and Annie. That was great information there. Dominic, it was great to get a little background on your website. I definitely follow what you do there. And I probably have a referral for your guide services. So, and Annie, lots of great information there. Obviously, just enjoyed your critiquing of your own writing and your editing tips and, you know, listening to how you consider your audience. Good stuff. So thank you both again. So session 3 coming up September 11th from 10 to 12. We have Charles Fergus and Dr. Jeff Larkin. These guys are exciting. There's so much I could say about them both. I tried to condense it down here. So Charles Fergus, Penn State grad with a background in or a writing degree. He's obviously got a prolific writing career. He's written for the Pennsylvania Game Commission, Penn State Wildlife Management Institute. He's written articles for Audubon, New York Times, Pennsylvania Game News, and much, much more. You can check him out at chuckfergus.com and find out about a lot of the other things he's gotten into. You'll find some of his books there that he's written. He's written novels, self-education books, guidebooks. He's a storyteller, guys, and you don't want to miss this guy. So,
and a journaler too, Jared. His big thing is journals. When he comes, he'll show them to us.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that, Sandy. Definitely don't want to miss that. So next we have Dr. Jeff Larkin. He is a wildlife biologist. He's a lot of things, but that's probably a quick way to talk about him. He works for the Department of Biology at the Indiana University of Pennsylvania, where he's a professor and a research specialist. He focuses on a lot of things relating to wildlife, habitat relations, community ecology, and ecology conservation of at-risk species. One of the things that I know him best for is his work with golden-winged warbler and cerealium warblers programs. And he's also, done lots of writing for his research. So he's been published extensively in several professional journals, and he's contributed chapters to books, and he's edited books. And he's done multiple research projects, obviously with lots of writing involved, but he's very passionate about wildlife ecology and management, and landscape and restoration ecology in general. So both of these guys are amazing. You don't want to miss this session. So once again, September 11th from 10 a.m. to noon. Thank you.
Sarah?
Sarah?
Yeah, thanks everybody. So I was just going to wrap this up really quick, kind of touching on some points when we started things up. Again, our whole goal is to continue these after the seminars to create a group of people who are supporting each other's writing. We're going to spend some time after session 3, maybe 10 minutes or so, to talk about how that's going to end up looking. So if you guys have any ideas, please send them our way. Our committee is going to get together between now and September 11th to start conceptualizing this. So please send us any ideas you might have. Other than that, thank you, Dominic. Thank you, Annie. We've got some really excellent recurring themes that are starting to pop up. And I think that's going to really help us as we conceptualize what our writing group is going to end up looking like, and some tips and tricks that we can focus on as we move forward in improving our own writing with one another. So thanks everybody, and I'll look forward to seeing you all again in a couple weeks.
And Sarah, don't forget to tell everybody that we've got a website where the link for this program will be up there if you want to go back and read more closely on someone's writing or learn some of the highlights. One of our members is also writing down the main points of each of the presentations, and that's very useful. And we've got them up there for the first session, and this week's session will be up in about a week.
Absolutely. rothrocksaf.org.
Great.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.